There are certain abuse terms that sound complicated, right? Clinical, like they belong in textbooks or therapy offices, not in your real life. And maybe you hear these words and you kind of assume that they don't apply to you or you don't quite understand them when it's actually going to help you make things completely click. Maybe you think that your relationship is painful or confusing, sure, but it's not something that needs like academic language to explain, right? But what I actually want to do is expose what's been happening to you and why you feel the way you do. These are not abstract concepts. They're lived experiences. And in many cases, they're not just feelings that you're struggling with. They're tactics that are being used on you. And once you understand what is actually going on underneath the surface, things are going to start to make sense in a way that stops you from blaming yourself. I'm Lisa Sonni. I'm a relationship coach who specializes in abuse and trauma bonds, and I've also lived this. My work is about translating complicated psychological language into something real, usable, and honest for women who are just trying to make sense of what they went through or what they're going through. I'm going to give you 5 clinical terms that women have told me sound confusing, and I'm going to make them make sense. But I'm saving the most commonly used tactic for last, so watch till the end because maybe you think you didn't experience this, but I bet you have. Also, in one of these tactics, I'm sharing a wildly controversial example that I don't think should be controversial at all. Let's start with euphoric recall. This term shows up in trauma research and addiction studies and all kinds of domestic abuse work. Clinicians like Bessel van der Kolk also talk about how the brain remembers relief more vividly than pain. And that distinction matters a lot here, right? He famously wrote, "The body keeps score." Euphoric recall is when your mind just keeps replaying the best moments, right? The early days, the connection, the chemistry, the version of him that felt loving and safe. And when you miss him or you doubt yourself, those are the memories that are going to come rushing in your brain. It's not the small ones where you felt anxious, you felt dismissed or constantly on edge. Now, this is not the same thing as romanticizing, right? Romanticizing is often conscious. You're choosing to focus on the good. Euphoric recall, that's automatic. Your nervous system is doing it for you. So after chaos, abuse, tension, pain, any kind, there are moments when things kind of settled, right? He calmed down, he apologized, he was kind again. That drop from stress into warmth, it feels really powerful. So your body recorded it as safety returning. So later, when you try to remember the relationship clearly, your brain is just prioritizing all of those good moments, not because they were more frequent or even more important, but because they regulated you, right? That's why so many women say, "I miss him," even when they know that really what they miss is how it felt when the pain stopped for a moment. It makes sense, right? You think you love them, but I wonder, is that feeling relief? It could be relief. Think about that. Now, the next one is cognitive dissonance, right? This term actually comes from a psychologist named Leon Festinger. Cognitive dissonance is really just the mental discomfort that happens when you're holding 2 beliefs that don't fit together, but you're trying to make them coexist. An example is, he loves me, but he hurts me. He's a good man, but I'm afraid of him. This relationship is destroying me, but I can't imagine my life without it. And I often say this, he is the pain and the comfort, the knife and the Band-Aid. That tension is unbearable, truly. So your mind, it's trying to reduce it, trying to reduce the discomfort. You have to look at it like a built-in defense mechanism. And often the way that it does that is by questioning you instead of the actual situation, right? Maybe I'm too sensitive. Maybe I'm misunderstood. Maybe this is just how relationships are. He's just angry or he's traumatized. He didn't mean it, you know? We rationalize and default to the easiest, most, palatable answer. If the problem is you can fix it, right? If he's traumatized, he can go to therapy. He chooses to abuse you? What the hell are you supposed to even do with that information? Now, you can experience cognitive dissonance in many different ways, right? We talk about it in the context of abuse, but let me give you a kind of an everyday answer. You go grocery shopping and it is pouring rain, like raining sideways, torrential downpour. You load your groceries, obviously, as fast as you can, and now you have the cart to return. Do you push it to the side or do you go and return it? Bad people leave it in the parking lot, right? You're not a bad person, but it's absolutely pouring and maybe you're in a rush. So you tell yourself you're not a bad person. You had a reason, the rain, to leave it this time. That's actually cognitive dissonance in action, right? You couldn't hold the belief that you are a bad person by doing this thing that you think is a bad person thing. So you rationalized a reason. When intentional manipulation is involved, this goes even deeper. This is what Dr. Peter Salerno refers to as traumatic cognitive dissonance. He wrote a fabulous book on the topic, Traumatic Cognitive Dissonance. This isn't confusion that happens by accident, right? It's confusion that's engineered. Your reality is being actively distorted through gaslighting, contradictions, and emotional pressure. Your brain isn't failing you here. It's literally trying to survive inside this distorted environment. So what makes traumatic cognitive dissonance so much harder to resolve is that the confusion isn't just inside you. It is being reinforced from the outside. So every time you start to see it clearly, something happens to kind of scramble it again, right? He denies, reframes, minimizes, or he becomes suddenly loving. So your brain never gets a stable reference point. You can't reality check because the reality keeps shifting. And that's why women say that they feel like they're losing their mind. It's not just inner conflict. It's inner conflict paired with external manipulation. And yes, it absolutely makes it harder to resolve because the moment you start to kind of land on a truth, that truth gets threatened and the rug gets pulled out from underneath you again. Your nervous system learns that clarity itself, even understanding, it's dangerous because clarity leads to conflict, punishment, withdrawal, or escalation. Now, the next one is intermittent reinforcement. This comes straight out of behavioral psychology, okay? B.F. Skinner studied what happens when rewards are given at random intervals. What he found was that unpredictable rewards create the strongest attachment. That's why gambling is addictive, and that's why abusive relationships are so hard to leave. I say this all the time. If he were cruel all the time, leaving would be easier. But he isn't. He's kind sometimes. He's loving sometimes. He's attentive just often enough to keep you hoping. You never know which version of him you're going to get. So you stay alert, right? You adjust and try harder. You wait for the good moments to come back. Intermittent reinforcement doesn't feel like manipulation when you're actually in it. It probably just feels more like inconsistent love, right? Someone who has issues, but also has potential. And your nervous system stays hooked because it's constantly scanning for signs that things are improving. And this is also where people get uncomfortable because intermittent reinforcement, it's not just like accidental mood swings. We know it's purposeful because the behavior changes when the outcome changes. He knows exactly when to pull you back in, right? Notice how the kindness shows up when you're pulling away. It never happens really when you're just fully compliant. Notice how the affection increases when there's a consequence on the table. That's not random. That is literally conditioning, right? This is a classic behavioral conditioning. It's very similar to Pavlov's dogs. A stimulus is paired with a response until the response becomes automatic. In an abusive relationship, pain is followed by relief, fear is followed by affection, and your body learns that enduring the bad is how you get the good. You got to put up with it, and then you earn your reward, you earn your cookie. Over time, you stop responding to logic, and you start responding to the pattern. You stay not because you think it's healthy, right? Your nervous system has been trained to wait for the reward. The inconsistency is the point. If the reward were predictable, you'd stop chasing it. So FYI, that's part of why leaving is so hard. Now let's talk about DARVO. This is one of my favorites. This term was coined by Dr. Jennifer Freed, who studies betrayal trauma. She was also a guest on my podcast in season 2, Relationships Uncensored, and I really recommend watching that episode if this part resonates with you. So DARVO actually stands for deny, attack, reverse victim, and offender. You bring up something that hurt you, he denies it happened the way you remember or denies that it mattered, and then he attacks how you said it, when you said it, or why you're bringing it up at all. And suddenly he's the one who's hurt, right? He's overwhelmed, he's misunderstood. This is textbook gaslighting, but gaslighting is more you're too sensitive or it was just a joke. There's actually a lot of ways to gaslight someone, but this is the most common and crazy-making tactic. You end up explaining yourself. You even might comfort him. You're apologizing. The focus shifts away from his behavior and, of course, onto your reaction. And over time, you learn that speaking up only makes things worse, so you stop. A controversial example, but this one lands. I love using this example. A victim of abuse suspects that he's cheating, and they go through their partner's phone. They find evidence, black and white, of his cheating, and the perpetrator is now the victim because you violated their privacy. Focus on the facts here, people. Don't say if you feel the need to look, then you already know it's over. Victims can't just leave. That's not how this works. This isn't just a normal relationship where somebody cheats. This is an abusive relationship. Some people will always be ridiculous and say that they're equally bad, which, anyway, the victim of abuse finds that they're a victim of cheating, and the perpetrator of abuse and cheating is now a victim because they don't agree with the method in which they got caught. Are we all hearing this? Now, I'm not saying that going through your partner's phone is okay. Please understand that. My God, don't willfully miss the point. Don't get distracted by that point. There are millions of controversial examples, so I want you to comment if you've got a good one, because this one always stirs the pot. Now, the last term that I want to break down is one that so many women say that they never experienced until they understand what it actually means: coercive control. This term is widely used in DV research, particularly in the UK. Evan Stark is one of the key researchers who defined it as an ongoing pattern of domination, not isolated incidents. Now, I used to say all the time, my abuser wasn't controlling. I genuinely believe that. He never gave me explicit rules. He didn't tell me what I could do or where or couldn't do, but I was constantly managing his reactions. I adjusted what I said, how I said it, and when I said it. And I thought through all the consequences before making even the most basic decisions. Not because he explicitly told me to, but because I learned what happened if I didn't. And he would praise me for being a good woman, right? And he would use praise to manipulate me. That's coercive control, right? He would flip out if I didn't text back fast enough, which led me to ensure that I always answered very quickly to avoid his rage. That's coercive control. It's not about commands. It's actually more about self-policing. And because there's no bruises, most women don't recognize it until much later. The real question isn't whether he controlled you. It's whether you were free. These terms are not complicated. They're actually very precise. They give language to experiences that women were never taught to name. And when you can name something, you stop turning it towards yourself, right? You stop asking what's wrong with you, and you start seeing what has been happening to you. So if this helped you see your experience more clearly, hit subscribe. This is what I do here. I name the things that were never named, and I say the parts out loud that were always kept quiet. And if you recognized yourself in one of these or more than one of these, that doesn't mean that you're behind. It actually means that you're starting to see the pattern. Is there a term that you want to know more about? Let me know in the comments.